He had spent years believing she was gone forever, but when he walked into that restaurant and saw her, his long-lost love, his entire world stopped. The soft chime of the restaurant door barely registered as Alexander Wolfe stepped inside. His mind was occupied. Business meetings, stock fluctuations, multi-million-dollar deals. His personal assistant trailed behind him, rattling off details about his next acquisition, but he wasn't listening. This was just another restaurant, another investment opportunity, or so he thought. The scent of freshly baked bread and grilled steak filled the air, mingling with the quiet hum of conversation. The place was nothing extravagant, small, cozy, the kind of spot where regulars were greeted by name. Not the type of place a billionaire like him would usually set foot in. He barely glanced at the menu as he took a seat by the window. But then, a voice, soft, familiar, and so achingly distant that it sent a chill down his spine. "Welcome to Rosie's Diner. What can I get you tonight?" Alexander froze, his hands clenched the menu as his breath hitched. That voice, he knew that voice. Slowly, as if afraid he was hallucinating, he lifted his gaze. And there she was, Isabelle Monroe, the woman he had spent 10 years searching for, the woman he had thought was dead. She stood before him wearing a simple black apron over a faded uniform, her long dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Her face, older but still breathtakingly familiar, held no recognition of him. His pulse pounded. This wasn't possible. The world around him blurred, the sounds of the restaurant, the clinking of dishes, the low murmur of conversation, all of it faded. Isabelle, alive, working as a waitress in a small-town diner when she should have been with him. She smiled politely, oblivious to the war raging inside him. "Sir, are you ready to order?" Alexander opened his mouth, but no words came out. Because how do you order dinner from the woman who once owned your heart, the woman you thought you'd lost forever? Alexander's chest tightened, his pulse thundering in his ears. For years he had imagined what it would be like if he ever found her again, but never like this. He searched her face, looking for any sign that she recognized him. Nothing, just polite patience, the way any waitress would look at a customer who was taking too long to order. His fingers curled into fists beneath the table. Did she really not remember him, or was she pretending? The memories came rushing back like a tidal wave. 10 years ago, Paris, that summer. The late-night walks by the Seine, the whispered promises beneath the city lights, the love that felt unbreakable. Then, the accident, a plane crash. A headline that shattered his world. No survivors reported. He had lost her that night. Or at least, that's what he had believed. For a decade, and yet here she was, standing in front of him, alive. "Sir," Isabelle prompted again, shifting her weight. "Would you like a few more minutes?" Her voice was the same, yet different, a little softer, a little tired. He could see faint, dark circles beneath her eyes, the kind that came from long hours and little rest. This wasn't the woman he had once planned to build a future with. This was someone who had struggled. Something inside him snapped. He pushed back his chair abruptly, nearly knocking it over. Isabelle flinched. His assistant, who had been silent until now, frowned. "Sir, is everything all right?" No, nothing was all right. Alexander's mouth felt dry, but he forced himself to speak. "Isabelle?" The name barely left his lips, just a whisper, but it was enough. Her expression shifted instantly. A flicker of confusion, of hesitation, and then her entire body went rigid. She sucked in a sharp breath. Her hand trembled slightly, gripping her notepad. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She knew. She remembered. Their eyes locked, 10 years of pain, loss, and unanswered questions crashing between them. Alexander exhaled slowly, his voice steady but filled with unspoken emotion. "It's you!" Isabelle took a shaky step back, her face paled, and then, to his complete shock, she turned and ran. Alexander's heart plummeted as Isabelle spun on her heel and bolted toward the back of the diner. For a split second he couldn't move, paralyzed by disbelief. Then instinct took over. He shot up from his chair, ignoring the confused stares, ignoring his assistant calling his name. He chased after her. Isabelle pushed through the kitchen doors, nearly knocking over a busboy. "Sorry," she muttered breathlessly, eyes darting round for an exit. Her chest heaved, panic crashing over her. How? How was this happening? She had buried this life, buried him, and yet there he was, Alexander Wolfe, the man she had once loved more than anything, the man she had spent years trying to forget. But before she could reach the back door, a strong hand grabbed her wrist. She gasped, spinning around, only to meet those same piercing green eyes she had dreamed about for years. Alexander's grip was firm, but not forceful. "Isabelle," he breathed, his voice raw, filled with something between pain and relief. She froze. The way he said her name, it was as if he had been carrying it in his soul for 10 years. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Alexander studied her face, his brows furrowing. "Why did you run?" Isabelle swallowed hard. I can't do this," she whispered. His grip on her wrist loosened, but he didn't let go. His voice dropped, thick with emotion. "You're alive," he said, almost in disbelief. "Do you have any idea what I've been through? I thought you were dead." Isabelle's stomach twisted. She tried to look away, but Alexander wasn't having it. Gently but firmly, he cupped her face, forcing her to face him. "Tell me," he demanded softly. "Tell me why you disappeared. Tell me why you let me believe I lost you." Tears burned at the back of her eyes. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, she had no idea what to say. Because the truth would destroy him. Tears welled in Isabelle's eyes as she pulled away from his touch. She had spent years preparing for this moment. Years convincing herself that if she ever saw Alexander again, she would walk away. But standing here, looking into his raw, desperate gaze, she knew she couldn't run anymore. Alexander's voice was low, pleading. "Tell me, Isabelle." She exhaled shakily, her past crashing down on her. "I didn't disappear," she whispered. "I was taken." Alexander's entire body stiffened. She looked up at him, her hands trembling. "The night before my flight, I was abducted. Someone didn't want me getting on that plane." His chest rose and fell unevenly. "Who?" She swallowed. "Your father." A stunned silence. Alexander staggered back as if the words had physically struck him. "My father?" She nodded, blinking back tears. "He came to me that night. He said if I stayed in your life, I'd ruin everything for you. That I was a distraction, a liability, and then he made me disappear." Alexander's hands clenched into tight fists. That's not possible. He made sure you believed I was dead," she cut in, her voice pained. "I woke up in a different country with no way to contact you. No phone, no money, just nothing." Alexander's head spun. His father, his own father, the man who had taught him how to run an empire, how to command a room, how to never show weakness, the man who had stolen the love of his life from him. Rage burned in his veins. His jaw tightened. "I would have found you." "You were never supposed to," Isabelle murmured. "That's why I stayed gone." Alexander's eyes were wild with emotion. "You think that was your choice, to leave me?" A single tear slipped down her cheek. "It was the only choice I had." The weight of her words crushed him. For 10 years, he had mourned her. For 10 years, he had blamed himself. And all this time, she had been suffering alone. Alexander inhaled sharply, his voice raw with a quiet, dangerous promise. "I lost you once, I won't lose you again." Isabelle shook her head. "It's not that simple, Alexander." His jaw tightened. "It is for me." She searched his face, his pain, his anger, his love, and for the first time in a decade, she felt something she never thought she'd feel again: hope.